Alright, I'm going to take us live now. Hello. Greetings.
Good morning. Hello.
This is Weekly Pan-African News Live. I'm Onyesanu.
I'm Demetria.
And we're going to get started in a few minutes. We're just waiting for people to come in so we're not just like talking to the empty internet. So please join us.
Talking to ourselves.
I love talking to Demetria. If it was just me and you, that'd be fine with me. Just kidding. I mean, it would be.
That is the randomness of it all. None of this makes sense. Why are you so crazy? It's a good time.
So we are All African People's Revolutionary Party, New Mexico. This is our weekly show, Weekly Pan-African News Live. We do this every single Thursday at 11 a.m. Mountain Time. It is our contribution to the world at this particular point in time because we are going through a deadly pandemic. We are living in the belly of the beast. And the belly of the beast, the U.S. government has like no interest whatsoever in protecting our people, African people, indigenous people, colonized people from this pandemic or from state violence during the pandemic. And so we started this show to educate our people, to put our analysis of the world out there, to begin to have important conversations about how our people should engage in this society and what we need to do to like better outcomes for us in this society. So we thank you for your tuning in. We're just going to wait for a couple more people to join and then we'll get started with the program. We hope you're having a good day.
Yes.
Also,
you'll have to forgive me this week. I'm at work.
Yeah, look at. You see the? I don't want to say where you work, yeah, but it's cool. I'm also technically at work.
Yes. It's forced participation in capitalism. Isn't it wonderful? Don't we love it?
It literally, if we stop working, we die because we can't pay our rent or eat food or have health insurance. It makes no sense. Thanks, capitalism.
Way to go.
But I deeply appreciate being able to do this while someone else is paying me. Like being able to like organize for the revolution while also stealing someone's money. Yeah. not making it so they can exploit my labor for 90 minutes.
Exactly.
If you are just tuning in, this is Weekly Pan-African News Live. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. We're just waiting for folks to trickle in. You know, time is a colonial construct. So sometimes being there right at 11 is just not possible. And so we want to let our audience join us gradually. And if you want to help us out, share this post wherever you see it. If you see it on my page, if you see it on the APRP New Mexico page, share the post. If you see it on Twitter, retweet it. If you're on YouTube, post that link to this show on your social media profiles. Help us build the audience. Help us get more folks listening in. Please.
You know what I'm going to do? Let me go on and go share it online.
See? Do what Demetria's doing.
Together.
Share the video. Help us out. See? Hope just shared the video. Shout out to the Red Nation.
Hey,
we appreciate you.
The Red Nation, stay looking out. We love that.
Help us build the audience because you know we made this because we understand that as African people, as colonized people, if we are hearing news about us on like CNN, NPR, New York Times, MSNBC, it's going to be mad racist. It's going to be full of lies and it's going to be extremely racist and it's oftentimes going to be extremely harmful to what we need to do as colonized people to liberate ourselves. And so we're literally creating our own lane, our own like media outlets to put our perspective out there instead of having to deal with like racist analysis of who we are as people and racist analysis of what's being done to us. We're going to tell the truth for our people, produced by us. So help us out. Cool. All right, we got a nice little audience. I think it's good to go, and folks will continue to join. But hello, my name is Onyesanu. This is Demetria. We are both members of the All African People's Revolutionary Party New Mexico chapter. What is the All African People's Revolutionary Party New Mexico chapter? Well, it is the New Mexico chapter of the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. It is a revolutionary Pan-African socialist party. I feel like repetition is a valid oratory style, so I'm just going to keep it moving. But we're a revolutionary Pan-African socialist organization. Our political objective is Pan-Africanism, which means one unified socialist Africa. We are seeking to organize every single African person. That means every person of African descent. That means black folks, niggas, if you prefer, around the same objective of just like, yes, that's good. Around the same objective of unifying our land. We believe when Africa is free and the vast wealth and resources of Africa are collectively controlled by the masses of African people under a scientific socialist government, our people everywhere in the world will be free because we'll be able to use that wealth and those resources in that land to provide healthcare, to provide housing, to provide safety, to provide free education for our children all the way through college. We'll be able to make sure that regardless of where we exist on the planet, whether it's at home or abroad, our people's needs are met and we're good. That's why we're Pan-Africanists. Also, would like to acknowledge that we are speaking to you from occupied Tiwa territory, also known as Albuquerque. But Albuquerque, like the entirety of the Western Hemisphere, is stolen indigenous land. European colonizers came to this land hundreds of years ago and straight up engaged in acts of genocide and warfare against the rightful owners, marginalized them, oppressed them to this day. But doesn't really matter how long ago you stole something, that shit is still not yours. This is Tiwa land. It will always be Tiwa land. Just like the entire continent of Africa is land that belongs to African people. And just like we're going to get Africa back and free it, indigenous people, the Tiwa nation, are going to get their land back if we have anything to do about it, anything to say about it. So we always want to start off by acknowledging the land that we are on and who is the rightful owner of it. And that is the Tiwa nation. Also, because we are revolutionary Africans, because we understand that we are part of a lineage of struggle that spans centuries, that begins from the moment the very first cracker, the very first colonizer set foot on the shores of Africa, we always want to start off by acknowledging our ancestors. So we want to call in an ancestor, two ancestors this week, to guide us in this work and to ground us in this space. The first ancestor we're going to call in is Zinzi Mandela. Zinzi Mandela was the daughter of Winnie and Nelson Mandela. She unfortunately passed away at age 59 this past Monday. So it was very recent, and she was really young. It was unfortunately due to complications from COVID-19. This pandemic is no joke, but Zinzi Mandela was the daughter of African revolutionaries, and she was an African revolutionary in her own right. She was an activist for radical land reform in Azania, which is the African people's name for South Africa. And when I say radical land reform, I mean the sister was saying, give the land back to African people. That's what they call radical land reform, giving the land back to the people who it belongs to. So she is someone who followed in the footsteps of her parents to fight for the masses of African people in Azania and across the continent. She was also the South African ambassador to Denmark. She was a legit lady, and it was a very, very big loss to lose her this week to COVID-19. So we definitely want to bring her into the space and honor her today. The second ancestor that we want to bring in and honor is Geronimo G. Jaga. Geronimo G. Jaga, also known as Geronimo Pratt, was a former Vietnam veteran who, after he was deployed to Vietnam with the U.S. military, said, I am not going to be a part of this. I do not support these actions. I am an oppressed and colonized African man, and I have no business fighting against other colonized people, fighting for national liberation. And so when he returned to the U.S. from Vietnam, he joined the Black Panther Party. He renounced the U.S. military, and he used the skills and knowledge that he gained in that space to help the Black Panther Party organize community defense in African communities. So Geronimo G. Jaga is an example of an African who was a part of the U.S. military, who turned against the U.S. military in order to fight for his people, in order to contribute to that fight for his people. And so we salute him alongside Zinzi Mandela. So this week we have a couple of really great things happening. Every single episode of this show, which again happens at Thursdays at 11 a.m. Mountain Time, we always have a political education segment. Why? Because, and you're not going to find an APRP event anywhere that doesn't have a PE segment. This is like a core part of what we do. And the reason why we do this is because there is absolutely no way that our people have any chance of finding liberation, of fighting for our liberation in the system, of taking out the enemies against us, the capitalist system, if we do not understand how that system works, if we do not understand how we came to be in this condition. The purpose of political education is to raise the masses of our people's consciousness around the question of why are we oppressed? Why is Africa exploited? Who did this? How can we stop it? What can I do as an individual African to contribute to the struggle to stopping it? And what can I do collectively to contribute to the struggle to stopping it? Like, that's the whole purpose of PE, political education, is to understand the enemy. And so the PE topic this week is why Africans shouldn't join the U.S. military. Why should African people not join the U.S. military? Last week on the show, we talked about the case of Vanessa Guillen and also the case of Lavina Johnson. They were both colonized women. Vanessa was Chicano, Lavina was African, who were abused and murdered within the U.S. military, and whose abuse and murder was subsequently covered up by the U.S. military. This is something like the abuse of women who are enlisted is something that's like endemic. It's like what's the word? It's very widespread within the military. There's like a lot of abuse, a lot of patriarchy, a lot of rape that is visited upon women and non-men within the military. And the reality situation is that's like happening within the military, but it's also happening outside of the military. Like wherever the U.S. goes, wherever the U.S. military goes, wherever there's a U.S. military base, crimes against women and children and non-men and vulnerable people in general follow. And the reason for this is because the U.S. military is an arm of the U.S., and the U.S. is a force for evil in the world. Maybe that's the first time you've heard something like this. Maybe that makes you feel like a kind of way, but it's important to like look objectively at how the U.S. has moved. We have like concepts like soft power, things where like the U.S. exerts its will, it's like, size and power on the world stage through like the banking system, through finance, through controlling who can trade with who, through so-called diplomacy where they're just like applying pressure on people to submit themselves to exploitation, through things like humanitarian aid where they're like, we're here to help, and then somehow thousands of people end up dying and resources are stolen. So like the U.S. moves around in this way saying, oh, we're just here to help. We're diplomats, we're humanitarians, we're here to help you. This is the UN. They move in that way, but they oftentimes end up bringing violence. That's what soft power looks like. But there's also straight up hard power, like economic sanctions, which we talked about the show many times, where the U.S. like straight up intentionally strangles the economy of a targeted country and like intentionally targets the civilian population for starvation and exploitation in order to force a country to submit to the will of the U.S. And the other form of hard power that you're probably more familiar with is U.S. military intervention. Like the war in Vietnam that we mentioned at the top of the show, where the Vietnamese people were literally trying to overthrow colonialism, and the United States flew in to help maintain colonialism, to help maintain the conquest of the Vietnamese people. Like that has typically been what U.S. military intervention looks like. We have the example, of course, of Afghanistan and Iraq, both wars, very, very long, extended wars that destroyed those countries and killed millions of people. We have the example of AFRICOM on the continent of Africa, which is an expanding U.S. military project, which has seen thousands of African people murdered in U.S. drone strikes with very little conversation or even attention coming from other places. And so we want to have like a deeper conversation about what it means for the U.S. to be a force for evil, and then what that means when African people are a part of that force. What it means when African people enlist in the U.S. military, and why we should not do that, why we should not contribute to that force for evil in the world. So, in order to have this conversation from like a first-hand perspective, we have our very, very first guest on the show. We're super excited. Our comrade Monique from Veterans for Peace is going to join us. Our very first guest, hello. So I'm going to pass it over to Demetria to conduct the interview. Hello, Monique.
Hi, good morning. Thank you both for having me. Thank you.
Hey, good morning. We're so excited to hear it.
Yeah, no, I'm excited.
All right, so hey, Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you end up in the military? What was your military experience? And how did you find Veterans for Peace and join?
So my path, my story. I'm a first generation American. My mother, family on my mother's side is from Central America. Family on my father's side is Lebanese and Caribbean. So both parents immigrated to the U.S. Back in the '60s. My father joined the Army while he was still in college. He was recruited, and so for me growing up and watching him, that was my indoctrination, to be honest. Is how that's how I was indoctrinated. I remember going to my first U.S. air show, and I was, I think I was about 2 or 3. I remember that, and I would watch him shine his boots, iron his uniform, all of those things, and to me, that's what I wanted to do. And for my father, he thrived. He thrived in the military, and my family would tease me and say that I would bleed blue, so to speak, meaning that I wanted to join the Air Force. And I didn't imagine that I would do anything other than go into the military. So I went to college. I went to ROTC, which is the Reserve Officer Training Corps, while I was in college, and actually dropped out of ROTC in my junior year because I came out. I'm a queer Black veteran, and was struggling with reconciling, like, stepping into my full self, but knowing that don't ask, don't tell. Ultimately enlisted in the military, and my journey of I would say harm continued. When I say harm continued, meaning for my father, who thrived in the military, period. There's this saying in the service, and my father would say it often. He would say, if the Army wanted me to have a family, they would have issued me one. Pretty, yeah. It is it's a, and I will watch my language, but it is a pretty horrible thing to say, not only to your wife but to your kids, and but that's the mentality. That is the mentality of the military, period, right? And I did not understand it. I used to just sort of like take it as a joke, whatever. And then when I went into the service, I realized what he meant. There is no room in the military, no matter what branch you are in, for anything other than serving the military. The military's purpose is to train people to kill. That is its only purpose. And it wasn't until I was deployed to Iraq, my deployments to Iraq, that it wasn't that I had realized that when I went in, but I think the reality of this is the purpose. I had some inklings when I went into the military. I initially went into the Air Force as in security forces. I was one of 10 women in a flight of 101 men. So not only was I a minority, so to speak, in regards to race, being Black, but also my gender, and also my sexuality. So it was very much about proving myself on a consistent basis. And I was in a field that was male dominated. And so I was in the Air Force for not a very long time. I actually was kicked out of the Air Force for being gay.
Wow.
And then what happens, right, I think about this a lot, is that when we get indoctrinated into something, brainwashed, we believe that we cannot exist outside of that construct. And so I struggled to just be in civilian life. And so I actually enlisted in the Army and went into military police. It's pretty much the same thing that I was doing in the Air Force. And again, right, people may question, like, why didn't I stop? Why didn't I realize? And it really is about this, there's, like I said, the indoctrination, the emotional state that happens when you believe that you cannot function without being a part of this system. And it's like your sense of self is completely stripped away. And so ultimately, going to Iraq, and by this time I was actively drinking. I was an active alcoholic. I ended up addicted to pain meds when I came back after my second deployment. Went through homelessness, and so I went through, really the ultimate stripping of my sense of self through so many ways, and then hit a wall. I did attempt to commit suicide twice, and still here. And so ultimately now, it was he's still around, Charles Powell. He's a Vietnam era veteran, and I would see him around town, and it was almost like I would see him in some of the oddest places, but I knew this was the universe, spirit, making it so. And he was the one who actually had me, finally convinced me to go to my first Veterans for Peace meeting, and was the youngest veteran in the chapter. And there were some things I was still kind of like, I don't know about you folks, but it did provide a space to where it was the first time that I had been around individuals who were questioning military service, questioning the military and its existence. And so with his help and another member, Sally Alice Thompson, who's the founder of the Albuquerque chapter, I ended up at my very first Veterans for Peace convention in 2014. And that's where I met other veterans who, post 9/11 vets is what they call us, who were questioning their military service, what they did, the morality of it, all of those things. And that's what really their military service started to move through the morality of it, all of those part of. That's what really I am a deep believer that the military needs to be dismantled. It should not exist in our society. I am also a big believer about educating our children, especially Black, Brown, First Nations kids, about the military. Our military recruiters target kids of color. They purposely target, and they have a tremendous amount of access to our kids in public school systems. And and here's the thing, these are men and women who are paid to lie. That is their job. They're paid to lie. And so recognizing that, and what's important is that parents, Black parents, need to know that that's the purpose of the military in our public school systems, to prey on Black kids, whether they're in high school or middle school. And the other method that they prey on Black kids is through, through sports, through the romanticization of military coming out on fields with, the uniform and the flag and all of these ways that it's marketed to our Black men and young Black men and girls. And so I would, if parents really could start to look at those pieces and recognize that their children are being preyed on. That's really, to me, I equate it with pedophilia in the sense of, you have these recruiters who are watching young Black men and women. They have access to them. They have access not only to their school scores, but also all of their pertinent personal information. Their home addresses, their phone numbers, emails, you name it. And they can call these young kids anytime they want and have conversations with them and circumvent the power of a Black parent or parents in this child's life. And so to me, that is very, very equatable to pedophilia, because it's like the watching, the stalking, the grooming, and before you know it, you have your child who goes to their mother or father and says, well, I've been talking with this recruiter. And then they're like, since when have you been talking to them? So it's the accessibility and, and something that I talk a lot to kids in school. And prior to COVID, I would go into schools and talk with kids about what they need to know. I can't go in and talk any child out of doing anything, but what I can educate them on are their rights and the questions they should be asking and the things that they should know. Recruiters are not going to tell them, and parents don't know all of this information. So part of it is talking about educating them that if they are going to have a conversation with a recruiter, if a Black child is going to have a conversation with any recruiter, they should have a trustworthy adult with them. If it's their mother, their father, their aunt, their grandmother, but a trustworthy adult who can be on the phone or in the room when that recruiter is speaking with them. Because they need to know, that child needs to know that whatever happens, there's at least one adult who is going to be truthful with them, and it surely is not going to be the recruiter. It's not. And when I think about recruiters target the U.S. today, especially around immigration and Black families, Black immigrants being in the community, one of the things that they don't realize is that accessibility piece. And so that's a steep learning curve for Black immigrants in the community, because one, they're here in the States, they're here in community, they're trying to keep their family together, they're trying to maintain, just living, plus all of the things that come with being an immigrant in the United States. And so there's a trust of just like, okay, my child is in school, my daughter's in school, they're being taken care of in the sense of like, I know where they are. And so this thought process around the accessibility piece isn't something that immigrants are aware of. And so one of the things that I try to do is talk to them about, here is how the U.S. operates on another level. So the U.S. operates about in the sense of this rhetoric that's been in existence around, we don't want immigrants in our country, we don't want these quote unquote foreigners in our country, yet still the military preys upon the children of immigrants. I mean, and in my own story, right, it wasn't, I didn't have a recruiter who preyed on me, but just the sheer storying of, and the romanticizing, that's what I did, watching my father day in and day out. And I mean, it was this whole storying of like, oh, that's what I want to do. I want to be just like my dad. It was an easy sell. No one had to convince me No one had to force me to do anything. But for kids who are who are first generation, whether both parents or one parent, who are recognizing the reality of this country and the inequality of when you have black, brown skin, that you are not treated equally, that has never been part of the construct. And so therefore you have less resources. And so there's a way that the military starts to look good, because it's storied as, you get money for college, you have a good job, you're taken care of, you don't have to, and it's true in the sense of, you put on your uniform every single day, you literally do not have to think about anything else other than doing your job. You get your paycheck, you're paid regularly, you have health care. I mean, it's this idea of like having a quote unquote good life. And the reality is that when our kids, and I say our kids because they are our kids.
Yes, very much so.
And so when we have our children, men and young girls, going into the military, and perhaps they are coming from, they're coming from families that are working families that are just trying to make it every single day, and they believe, well, I'm going to join the military, I'll have money for college, and then I can take care of my family that way. And so there isn't talk about the violence as was mentioned, to women in the military. 1 in 3 women are raped in the military. The civilian number is 1 in 5. There's no difference. Women have, just like black bodies in the military, women have never been treated equally in the military. And so, irregardless of a woman putting on the uniform and knowing her job and being able to do her job just as good, if not better, it makes no difference. And so when I heard a couple days ago about Madeline Schwegel becoming, the Navy's first black female fighter pilot, it was bittersweet for me, because it was like, one, I was like, we are in 2020, and she is the first. You mean to tell me that she's the first black Navy pilot? What? And then at the same rate, I thought, hell yeah, good for you. But it's just again, it's very short lived, because what has her story been like? What has her path been like? And so for the young black girls, who read her story been like? And that is her path been like? Who then say, and so I want to do that. The young black girls, what has her read her story been like? And that is her path been like? That does not. And so I want to do that. Young black girls, in your mind and your spirit. Because that's what the military does. It strips black bodies of their spirit, their minds, and our bodies. And a lot of us don't really ever get to the point where we feel whole again. A lot of us stay in this state of limbo. And then there's some of us, like myself, who are able to get to a point where they can feel like they're actually contributing back to society again. I look at service as being in the community and helping in the community. My service of 10 years and 2 tours in Iraq means nothing. That means nothing to me, because of the things that I did to other people. And so when we think about the historical ramifications, right, the historical trauma that Black bodies have held, being taken from Africa and enslaved in the United States, and then the history, right? I mean, there have been Black bodies a part of U.S. wars since the very beginning. So to think about the historical body trauma that our bodies hold, then you add the piece around war and Black bodies in war and the trauma that holds. There are moments where I think, well, how does any healing come? Where's the room for the healing at all? And how do I not perpetuate rage and harm and sadness and all of those things upon other people in my community? How do I not do that? And I have no answer other than having an awareness of those pieces, and then waking up each day and trying to do as little harm as possible. And then in the moments where I say something inappropriate or I do something inappropriate, then I'm like, okay, gotta do that better next time. But to think about the historical numbers, so the numbers of Black bodies enslaved coming to the United States, brought here, and then the sheer numbers of Black men and women fighting for a country that its sole purpose was never to have us as equal citizens. So how do we reconcile that idea of, well, I want to go in the military? And so there are the pieces around the economic drafting of Black people into the military. And so if we actually had the equality that should exist in this country, we wouldn't have the numbers of Black men and women going into the military that we see, right? So we are keeping the war machine going by sacrificing our bodies. We are the food for the war machine. So we go into the military, and then we go to other countries and in our own communities here, as we are seeing with National Guardsmen, and oppressing and suppressing other Black, brown bodies. Yep. And so we don't need to have the white supremacy complex doing the work. We're doing it for it. And so part of that is letting Black service members know about the GI Rights Hotline, which is a hotline that is completely free and available for anyone to call who is in active duty or in the reserves or National Guard. And that hotline is specifically to help service members who are looking at no longer wanting to serve, wanting to put down arms, have questions. That's the one way that the information is accessible to Black service members, and it's open to Black bodied, brown, Native, First Indigenous folks. But there's nothing else out there that is readily available to talk to for Black service members to call or talk. I believe that it's difficult in the Black community to talk about, to speak up, so to speak, around against the military-industrial complex. There's a lot of pride. There's, and so I think part of that is the moral injury that happens when we serve, because we're taught the quote unquote right and wrong. We're taught about how we treat people. We're spoken to about our history and what we went through, and then we go into the military and perpetuate that. And so to then come out and actually sit and break it down, because it's really about deconstructing our own selves and realize, oh my God, this is what I just did. This is what I've been a part of. That is a moral mind, what. And so it's easier in a lot of ways to just continue to believe, because I know from my own experience, when I started thinking about all of the things that I did, and I mean, I could not, and there are moments that I still cannot reconcile things. And I still ask, like, how could I have been a part of that? Why did I think that was a great idea? Why did I want to? But I will never have those answers. And I think those are the things that we as veterans, Black veterans, can get stuck into, and then we can't move out of. And the guilt and the shame, and the isolation, and so it's that I am a horrible person, and I struggle with that. I struggle with that. I don't ever feel like I am at a point where I feel like, you know what, sure, I can be in community, I can be in this room, or I can be in this conversation, and I don't have a sense of guilt or shame about the things that I've seen and done. And whether or not that'll ever go away, I don't think it will. In some ways, I don't really want it to go away, because I feel like those are the things that I need to consistently hold space for, so that I don't repeat it. And I feel like I've been going on and on, so please, I apologize for just kind of going on like that.
So you answered every single question I was going to ask.
Oh, Jesus. I'm sorry.
No, don't be. That was incredible.
No, don't be sorry. That's amazing. You've got so much information out there. And I think people forget that when we're dealing with children especially, there's not a high school that doesn't have some sort of ROTC program.
That's right.
And especially with Title I schools and poorer schools, it's like, here's your way out of poverty. Here is your way to a better life. But they don't talk about, here's what you're going to have to sacrifice for that.
That's right.
And especially with our immigrant kids and our first generation kids. So no, you answered every single question plus that I would ask, and giving valuable information to anyone who might be watching who's in the military or who just got out and who needs that little push to say, hey, you're gonna be okay, and here's how to make things better, or to just be a little bit better.
Yes. I mean, do you know that in 2001, when the No Child Left Behind Act was created, it paved the way for two things. It paved the way for military recruiters to have free access into any public school system. So they can go and ask for records of any child or the whole 9th grade. Secondly, about 18 or so months later, it paved the way for the creation of the Joint Advertising Military Recruitment System, called JAMMERS. And this system, till this day, is utilized or is accessible by colleges and universities, selective service, FAFSA, the government loan program, and any young man who does not register through selective service, and I'll speak in terms of, black men, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if a young black man chooses, you know what, I am not going into the military, I'm going to go to college, I know I'm going to get a bunch of loans, but that's just what it's going to be, I'm going to get my education. And if he chose not to register for selective service, but then applies for college and obviously applies for loans, he will not receive those loans because he did not register for selective service. And this program called Jammers, this is what colleges and universities use. So he will be disqualified. If he decided he wanted to purchase a home, he would be denied. If he wanted to purchase a car and needed a loan, he would be denied. Right? So we see this cycle of oppressing black bodies. It's like, oh, here's another little cog in the wheel to keep black bodies from succeeding,
yep.
Right? From moving into the fodder machine. And so that's like, again, how many parents are aware of that so that they can have that conversation with their young black son and say, okay, here's what you need to know. Ultimately, you can make your own decision, but here's what you should know. On top of all of the other life conversations that black mothers and fathers, grandmothers, aunts, uncles have to have with young men. So there's that piece. And when we look at how this administration, and for the fact, in my opinion, the previous administration as well, and whatever future administrations come to exist around immigration, we know that it is about, quote unquote, keeping people out of this country, and for the immigrants that are in this country, keeping that education level at a minimum.
Right.
Keeping it at a minimum, not only with the immigrants in the communities and undocumented individuals in communities, but keeping that fear factor going as well, so that they really have no ability, so to speak, to engage in those conversations with their kids, right? Keep that information low. Another thing for parents, when they go to register their children, the schools give them a form that says, well, do you want your child's information released to military recruiters?
No.
Right? So, yeah, guess what? That form means nothing. That form means nothing. It gets filed away in the school. Mm-hmm. There's an actual Department of Defense form, opt-out form, that the parent has to complete. Mm-hmm. How many school administrations and principals and teachers know this, and if they do, are actually sharing that information with the parent, right? So it's this knowledge, that these knowledge pieces that are purposely being hidden away and kept secret from black, brown folks in the communities in order for their children to continue being preyed upon and taken, quite frankly, by military recruiters.
I really appreciated the earlier comparison you made to like grooming and pedophilia. Like, I've never heard it put that way, but like the way that you describe like how they like get close, the recruiters get close to kids like independently of their parents. The way you describe how like once they're in the military, like who they are is like broken down, and how they're trained to just be like weapons. Like, it sounds like intense abuse, like emotional, physical, and mental abuse, and it starts when kids are like 18 and younger. It's wild. 14. Damn, it's just like, it's out of control how predatory it is. Like, I've learned a lot from this interview, and we're really, really grateful that you were able to join us today. Even in the comments, people are like, I didn't know that. Holy shit. Like, they're just like, Yeah, you're just like dropping knowledge. So we only have a few minutes left, but we actually have some questions from the audience for you, if that's okay.
Yes, definitely.
So one question is, how do parents put pressure on schools and the military to stop preying on our children?
It is so, I mean, I've been asked that question many, many times. I think the most realistic, being vocal with schools and teachers. So when parents go in to register their child, and obviously things have shifted because of the pandemic piece, but I think being vocal and talking with other parents, that's huge. So, you know, if it's, you know, again, we recognize that in Black communities, it's intergenerational households. So sharing that knowledge with everyone in the household, so that if grandma goes if grandma has to communicate with someone at the school, grandma's able to communicate. And by the way, I do not want XYZ for my granddaughter or my grandson. Same with aunts, uncles, whomever. So I really believe that it's about getting the family members and then other families. And then eventually the school, teachers, the principal, whomever it is, repetition and hearing it on a constant level. On a larger level with the military, the military industrial complex is strong. And as we know right now, it is stronger, in my opinion, than ever before, and has more money behind it than ever before. And so I believe the only way right now is through the system of the schools and vocalizing.
And that's really an important point you made about how African and Indigenous families are often intergenerational, and if you like recruit all the elders into that work of being like, stay away from our kids, it's going to have an impact. So like lean on the intergenerational nature of our families to like put pressure on these schools to get these recruiters to stop abusing our children.
That's right.
Another question for you is, Comrade Tina shares that students at her daughter's school took the ASVAB and they were told it could replace the SAT, and it was given without consent. So what are your thoughts on that? And also, could you explain what the ASVAB is?
The ASVAB, yes. It's the aptitude vocational something battery. I should know it by now. But yes, so APS has been doing this for years, telling kids and lying to kids, and the teachers, whether they are aware of it or not, are part of the lie, that it's mandatory for kids to take it, and it is not. If the information can be found online, I actually had a parent ask me this a few months ago, and her daughter, I texted her daughter a picture of where it showed that it is not mandatory on the APS website, and the daughter went in and stood up to the teacher and said, I am not taking this test. So yes. So what a lot of schools have been doing is that they've been tricking the kids, lying to the kids, telling them, oh, they can replace it, they have to take this test. They do not. Those scores are strictly used for the military and are input into that system I spoke about earlier, the JAMR system, the Joint Advertising Military Recruitment System. So what then happens is, once those scores go in, this is what I'm thinking around junior year or so, that once those scores get input, that's when the recruiters then start tailoring their recruitment strategy toward the kids, because those scores are math, mechanical aptitude, reading, you name it, and they will tailor their recruitment style based upon those scores, and also the history that they have that they're able to look up in the JAMR system on that student. And they will know that students like, likes, dislikes, strengths, you name it. So they get a whole historical picture And that's how they then go in and tailor the recruitment. So for that person, it is, you go on the APS website, you can, if they have access to the internet, and Google ASVAB APS, take a picture of it, save it to their phone, share that information with other parents, other students, empower the students, and let them know they do not have to take that test. Do not have to take it.
Thank you so much. I actually just found that page on the APS website. I'm going to drop it in the comments where it says this test is not mandatory.
That's right.
And the strength of the harder the push for the ASVAB is the strength of the ROTC program. So if you have a big, strong ROTC program, the push for the ASVAB is serious.
Yes.
Yeah. So the comrade who asked that question, Tina, is saying in the comments, after their daughter took the test, the recruiter came to review the scores with the kids. They tried to coerce all the kids into registering on a website to get their scores, and then the students would get connected to colleges, etc., but it was a recruiting tool for them. My daughter refused to register on this website because of what you, Monique, helped us know about that test.
Oh, fantastic. Great. That's great. That is good to know. Yeah.
So we want to thank you so much for your time. This has been really incredible. This was an extremely successful interview, so we're very happy that you joined us. I learned a lot. The folks in the comments learned a lot. We deeply appreciate you. This was really incredible. Thank you for your time.
Oh, yeah. Anytime. And if folks have further questions and they want to, I don't know what's easiest, I'm happy. You all have my contact info. They're more than welcome to reach out. But yeah, thanks for having me, and I'm glad that we were able to have at least this type of conversation. This is important. And thanks for all the work that y'all that you all do. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. We hope that we work with you again, because you are awesome. And the people in the comments are like, this person helped my kid not get recruited into the military. So clearly you're putting in work in Albuquerque, so we appreciate you.
No worries. Anytime, ladies.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Thanks. Have a beautiful day, everyone.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye. Cool. Alrighty. Thanks, y'all. We appreciate you for your comments and your interaction during that interview. We deeply appreciate Monique. Now we're going to keep it moving and continue with the rest of the show. And so I'm going to toss it to Demetria for some COVID-19 updates.
I'm back. All right. So what we know is COVID is a real thing. Yes, we're not confused. It's not a hoax. It's a real thing. So you need to wear your mask, wash your hands, stay out of crowds. Just because things are open doesn't mean you need to go. Okay? Because COVID is still very much a real thing. Please, keep yourself safe. Don't touch your face, wash your hands, wear your mask all the time. People have stopped saying we have to flatten the curve. That's not our push anymore, right? Why isn't that our push anymore, guys? Folks? Sorry guys, it's my default. Folks, why is that not our push anymore? It's because this country does not have the infrastructure to sustain a curve flattening. It doesn't, and it really doesn't have any interest in flattening the curve, in eradicating the disease. I just don't think this country cares all that much. Mm-hmm. This country cares about money.
Yep.
That's about it.
Absolutely.
That's about it. This is a capitalist country, and it only cares about using our bodies and our work, and it doesn't care about our health or our children. That's why there's this huge push to go back to school. Schools are trying to open not because it's safe, but it's to provide child care. Not because it's what's best for these kids. It's to provide child care. It is not safe. So yeah, the curve can't be flattened because America doesn't want the curve flattened. That's all.
It was really interesting how, the first month or two of the pandemic, that was everywhere. New York Times was like, flatten the curve. Governor was like, flatten the curve. Mayor was like, flatten the curve. And then all of a sudden, people just stopped saying that. And the reason for that is exactly what you said. Exactly what you said. The U.S. straight up does not have the public infrastructure. The whole point of people staying at home, sheltering in place, making tremendous sacrifices, losing their jobs, was to allow time for a public health response to be organized. That was the whole point. And that's what other countries did. They were like, we need to make sure that the hospitals aren't overwhelmed. And so we're going to ask you to stay home and like 6 feet distance and wear a mask or whatever for like this period so that we have space to build up the capacity. Other countries did that. United States never did. There was no public health response available. So people stayed home. People lost their jobs. People are experiencing like intense isolation because of this pandemic, and there's no help coming in the United States.
Nope.
The reality situation is that right now we're having this debate about, like you said, whether it's safe to send kids back to school in the middle of a pandemic, which is under no way, shape, or form under control in the United States. We're having this debate not because it's like a reasonable thing to do to send kids back to school in this situation, but because of capitalism. Because they want the kids' parents back at work. And if a child is out of school full time and a parent can't afford childcare, then what are their options? Like right now, the reality situation is that the only way that we're going to be able to control this pandemic in the United States is if people are paid to stay home, if rent is no longer charged, if healthcare is universally available. In Vietnam, they were like, we need y'all to stay home. We understand it's going to be hard for you to be able to eat if you can't work. So we're going to bring you food to your door. In Venezuela, they said, look, y'all need to stop being in the streets. We need you in your homes, but we understand that you have bills. So we're going to freeze the rent and stop your bills for a year. Venezuela is considered a so-called third world country. Venezuela is constantly denigrated in the U.S. military as a place that's supposed to be exploiting its own people. But the reality situation is that if you're living in Venezuela, you have access to healthcare, you have free rent, and you have free bills right now during a pandemic, because the so-called dictatorship in power in Venezuela understands that if you want people to stay home, you must provide for their needs. But we are living in the richest empire on the face of the planet, rich because it looted the entire world, including our ancestors, and it is not able to use not even a fraction of those riches to make sure people can actually deal with this pandemic safely. Like, if you're telling people to stay home, then you have to make it so they can like survive if they don't work. And that's basic. Like, why is it Vietnam understands this? Why is it Venezuela understands this? Why is it that Cuba, another place that is constantly attacked in the U.S. media for being something oppressive of its own people, has doctors going door to door in every single neighborhood, testing people and giving them medicine? That is how Cuba has no new COVID cases this week. Like, why is it that the richest country on earth can't do this, but all of these poor places understand if people can't work, then you must provide for their needs. In order to control the pandemic, if people are staying home, you must provide for their needs. The only way this is ever going to get under control is if the United States pays people to stay home, cancels rent, cancels bills, makes sure people can eat, gives them health care. Oh my God, during a pandemic where millions of people lost their jobs, the primary means of people having health care is through health insurance provided by jobs. What happens if you lose your job? You have no health insurance. During a pandemic, that's millions of people. That's millions of people. It makes no sense. And I feel like
starting with logic, and logic will never work in this place. Will never work in this place. And you're starting with, hey, maybe you should like invest in your citizens and like in their well-being, because if you take care of your citizens will take care of you. This place is very particular about who's a citizen. So you're starting with like decency and humanity, and the United States is very low on both of those.
It's because it's capitalist. Like, the only motivation here is to make sure that people like Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Donald Trump can just like keep making money.
Trillionaire.
Right, like, it's just like
Jeff Bezos is gonna be a goddamn trillionaire, and there are so many people who are about to be on the street forcing the homelessness because they can't afford rent, because they don't have a job, or they haven't lost their job, they've just had a reduction in hours, so they can't fucking afford to pay for their housing, so they're forcing homelessness. But this bastard is going to be a trillionaire? Get the fuck out of here. I'm sorry, I didn't want to do that.
No, it's all good.
That shit aggravates me.
It's the irrationality of the place where we live. Like, the reality situation is that this pandemic is never going to be under control in the United States unless these basic steps are taken to make sure people can take the safety measures required without being homeless, jobless, and not able to provide for themselves or their family. Like, that's it. The only way that the United States is going to get the situation under control is if they pay people to stay home and take care of them. That's it. That needs to be the demand. Like, we're having lots of conversations about people's individual actions, which I understand, because for some reason, because we live in a deeply irrational capitalist country, wearing a mask, for example, has become like a fucking political issue. And so there's like a lot of, you know, settlers, Europeans, who are out of their I don't want to say out of their mind, because it's not bad to be out of your mind, but they're just like mad selfish. I'll say they're mad selfish and really antisocial, and who are like, you know, making this like a big thing. But the reality situation is that individual people not wearing masks is not the reason why this pandemic is not under control. The real situation is the pandemic is not under control because the U.S. government is putting the needs of wealthy people, is putting the needs of a capitalist system that depends on exploiting people before people's lives. They're saying the ability of Jeff Bezos to make $1 trillion is more important than your children not getting a deadly virus and dying. Like, this is the reality situation we find ourselves in.
Yep. And the debate of, well, do kids even really get COVID? Bitch, shut up, stupid. Yeah.
We just don't know. Like, this virus came onto the scene like in fucking January, and we're still learning new things every day that are terrifying. So like the reality is there's like not enough information, not even enough visibility of who even has this virus, no health infrastructure to treat the people that have the virus. It's just not going to work. The only way that we're going to make it out of this is if people are paid to stay home and they are taken care of. Deliver meals door to door like Vietnam. Freeze rent and stop bills like Venezuela. Give universal health care and door-to-door testing like Cuba. Also, open up these. It's not safe to travel right now. It is not safe to be in a hotel. So all these hotels have a gang of empty rooms and there's people sleeping on the street. There's mad empty houses that have been turned into Airbnbs that no one can use right now because it's a pandemic, that are just empty. While like last week it was like 105 degrees and there's people sleeping on the street while housing is empty. So during a pandemic, when it's not safe, period, to be on the street, you should be using these empty housing facilities to put people in them so they are taken care of. So they are not forced to figure out how to social distance and wear a mask and wash their hands frequently with no running water. Like, that's the reality situation for hundreds of thousands of people in the richest empire on earth, because that is how capitalism works. Capitalism does not give a fuck about you. Capitalism would sell your baby if it needed to make a profit. And they have. That's how it started. Our babies. So yeah, the reality situation is that we're having like these really irrational conversations in the United States about when is it safe to reopen, are we in the second wave, blah, blah, blah. Like, we're having these conversations trying to figure out a way to make something impossible happen. The impossible thing is having a safe reopening of the economy or schools or anything during the middle of a global pandemic that is not in any way, shape, or form under control in the United States. There is no safe way to reopen right now. There is no safe way to reopen. There is no safe way to have kids in person in schools. I'm sorry. Like, I understand, like, people are in a rock in a hard place because, again, the U.S. government has failed on every single level to provide real solutions for people, to provide real care for people. And so now we have a situation where some parents have been out of work since March. People are not able to pay their rent. People need to figure out how they're going to be able to, like, survive and have their kids full time. Like, it's an impossible situation for a lot of people because of how deeply the government has failed. But the reality is there's no safe way for the U.S. to do this. The U.S. does not have the capacity to open schools safely, to open businesses safely. It's just not going to happen because, like we said, it's not about protecting people's lives in this society. It is about profit. It is about upholding capitalism and sacrificing us to do that. So, like, we have to change the conversation. We have to stop being like, okay, well, if we have, like, some kids come in on Wednesdays and some kids come on Fridays and maybe we, like, can open the gym, but we have it at, like, this percent, it's not gonna work. It's not gonna work. Like, the reality situation is that people just need to be paid to stay home. People just need to be taken care of while they can stay home. And if other countries that are much poorer than the United States are able to figure out how to do this, and the thing that those countries have in common, Venezuela, Cuba, Vietnam, is that they're socialists. They're socialists, and this is a capitalist country. If these poor countries can figure this out with a fraction of the resources of this empire, then there's no question that the U.S. can figure it out. It is not a matter of possibility of taking care of people and letting them stay home. It's a matter of will. It's a matter of desire. It's a matter of priorities. So we, as like the masses of people who are being sacrificed on the altar of capitalism, need to organize, in our communities need to organize across struggles, and we need to begin to demand the kind of measures that are required to control this pandemic. Not yelling at individual people for not wearing masks, not yelling at individual businesses for, not going against like the stay-at-home measures or whatever. We need to start focusing on the system, the structure, the people at the top who are failing, and say, look, the only way this is gonna work is if you pay us to stay home, if you freeze these bills, if you freeze these rent, if you give people health care during a pandemic, if you make systemic widespread testing mandatory. Like, this is the only way it's gonna happen. These like half-assed reopening measures are just gonna kill thousands of people. They already have.
Hundreds of thousands of people.
Mostly us and indigenous people. So,
Yep.
So yeah, next up, we have African world updates. Usually we have like the changing overlays. Today we just did like the horizontal one because we had a guest. So just pretend it says African world news. But we got some updates, and again, this section of the program is to talk about what's going on at home in Africa and also what's going on throughout the diaspora around this pandemic and around, African people's issues. Because if you watch CNN, it's going to be a bunch of racist stuff. But if you watch us, we're going to tell you the truth. We're going to tell you what's really happening. So first up, Kenya, a country in East Africa, has canceled the entire 2020 school year for all primary and secondary schools. They're going to remain closed for all of 2020, and they're not going to open until January 2021. Kenyan government was like, we cannot, there's just no safe way to do this, so we're just going to make the call. Why is it that this so-called shithole country, that's what Trump called it, a shithole country, why is it that this nation in a continent that's supposed to be like uncivilized is able to make much more rational decisions than the so-called freest nation on earth? Who knows? Maybe it's because the United States sucks and tells lies about Africa and African people. But all primary and secondary schools will remain closed in Kenya until January 2021. Colleges and universities are set to reopen in September, but they have extremely strict guidelines in place for containing the virus. We're going to see how that goes. I'm not sure if it's a good idea, particularly colleges and universities having a lot of international students, but I'm sure Kenya will figure that out for itself. As of July 7th, Kenya has recorded 8,067 cases of COVID-19 and 164 deaths. And I just want to point out that right now the United States has like millions of cases of COVID-19 and hundreds of thousands of deaths.
Hold on, I'm going to look it up right now. Keep going.
Do it. Also happening in Kenya is that, so Kenya is not a free African nation. Kenya unfortunately has a neo-colonial government in place, which is subservient to imperialist powers like Europe, like the United States. And what a neo-colonial government means is most often, oppression of its own people. And so even though they're making this positive decision about schools, they are also unfortunately putting in place curfews and quarantines and having police and the military enforce those curfews and quarantines. And what happens when police and the military enforce laws in colonial societies? Violence against colonized people. And that is precisely what's been happening in Kenya from the beginning of the pandemic. Africans have been defying those curfews and protesting the quarantines, not because they are like the reopened protesters in the United States who want haircuts, but because many, many African people on the continent are desperately poor and rely on like working on a daily basis in order to feed their families, in order to pay their rent, not unlike African people in the United States. And so if they are forced to quarantine without any measures to take care of them, they are not going to survive. And so that is why the masses of African people in Kenya have been taken to the streets to protest the quarantine, to protest the ban. Because if you're not taking care of people, but you're telling them to stay home and they can't work, it's just not going to be possible. It's not sustainable. Unfortunately, police in Kenya have killed at least 100 African people in 2020. And 21 of those killings were related to so-called COVID infractions, such as enforcement of curfews and not wearing masks. Imagine killing someone for not wearing a mask, particularly in a situation where, again, rather than providing for the needs of the people, the government is instead imposing declarations from the top that drastically impact people's lives and is enforcing those declarations by force. Like, instead of, again, paying people to stay home and providing them health care, the Kenyan government is choosing to say, stay home and figure it out, and also, if you don't, we're going to kill you. That's the situation under neocolonialism. Elsewhere in the continent, also in East Africa, Ethiopia has seen several weeks of civil unrest after the murder of Hundessa, who is an Ethiopian musician and a member of an ethnic minority that has been historically persecuted by the neocolonial government of Ethiopia. After that musician was murdered, the people took to the street by the thousands, and unfortunately the neocolonial government of Ethiopia again responded with force. The army was deployed. 239 people have been killed. 3,500 people have been arrested in these protests. The internet was shut down by the Ethiopian government for 2 weeks in the middle of a pandemic. And so for 2 straight weeks, there was no new information about what's happening with this pandemic in Ethiopia. But now that the army has successfully managed to repress the people's uprising, internet access has been partially restored. And so that's the news there. Again, these neocolonial governments, which are puppets of Western powers like the United States, are puppets of Western powers like Europe, maintain a relationship to their people that is very, very similar to the relationship the U.S. government has with African people in the United States, where we are treated as a threat to be put down instead of people who should be served by the state in power. And so that is the face of neocolonialism in Africa. It's police shooting down African people just like they do here for the crime of speaking out against injustice. Also, Azania, also known as South Africa, Azania is the African people's name for South Africa, is one of the COVID-19 hotspots on the African continent. They are being confronted by surging hospitalizations due to COVID-19, and as a result, Azania has decided to reinstate a night curfew and also make it mandatory for all residents to wear face masks in public. And they've also suspended sales of alcohol to try to cut down on folks being out and about at night. Azania has recorded 4,079 deaths. 25% of those 4,079 deaths have occurred within the past week. So the situation is pretty intense right now in Azania, and we'll keep y'all updated on that. And for the next section of the program, which is going to be talking about what's happening with this pandemic here in occupied Tiwa territory, I'm going to hand it to Demetria.
Hold on. All right, real quick, just to bounce back. There are 7.5 billion people on this earth. 13 million of them have COVID-19. And in this country, 3.4 million people have COVID-19.
It's like a fourth.
136. Huh?
It's like a fourth of all the cases on Earth are in the United States.
Right here. 136,000 deaths.
Yikes.
And that's just that's for today. So just a little bit of information. All right, I'm talking about New Mexico. Things I don't like New Mexico right now. I love it. I don't like her though. She's tripping. We've been saying from the very jump, from I think our very first show, that the eviction moratorium that was put in place was nonsense. It was a sham. It was bullshit, and it wasn't going to save anyone. We've been saying that. We're going to continue to say that because it's real. If people cannot work, they cannot pay rent. There is not a rent freeze in place, so people are going to be forced into homelessness because the rent moratorium is a sham. The plan they put in place to not shut off people's utilities is also about to come to an end. So if you do not have a place to live, what are you supposed to do? How are you supposed to stay safe in this pandemic? We've been over that. So if you let's say you are able to pay your rent because you're just, scraping and pulling as we usually tend to do, but you can't afford to pay utilities, so you have a roof over your head, but no light, no gas, possibly no phone. This place is the bad place. Look at Moms for Housing. Hold on, I'm not even with it. Hey, boss.
I'll take over. So yeah, the example of Moms for Housing in Oakland is something that we should learn from, because they literally, this is a group of African mothers, single mothers, who were houseless, who were living in Oakland, which is a city that has experienced very intense gentrification, which is the epitome of what we were just talking about, where there's all this empty housing that's been taken over by motherfucking Airbnb, while people are sleeping in tent cities on the streets. And so Mom for Housing saw that situation. They saw the empty housing and the community where they grew up in, and they're like, we're taking this back. There's absolutely no reason why we and our children should be houseless in a situation where there is massive amounts of available housing that is just priced at a point that we cannot afford. And so these women organized in their community, they built up a movement and they took back a house, and they're still in that house. They were able to organize so much community support that when the mayor of Oakland deployed military police with tanks in order to take them out of in order to arrest them and take them out of this house, there was an international outcry that put intense pressure on the mayor to work with them, and that's precisely what happened. That is direct action organized by African women, by African mothers, that resulted in houseless people being housed. These cities are failing on every level. Like, it's happening on Tiwa territory, it's happening in Oakland, it's happening all over the United States. The city leadership is failing on every level to take care of this housing crisis, even during a pandemic, which means that houseless people, poor, working class people, oppressed people have the right and responsibility to take the matter into our own hands. To say, if you cannot give us housing, we're going to take that housing. And so we definitely encourage people to look at the example of Moms for Housing, look at the history of tenant organizing and eviction defense work, some of which the APIP has been actively involved in, and use those examples in this moment to begin to organize to address this eviction crisis. Because as the eviction moratorium showed, the people in charge, they seem to have no concept of reality. They seem to have no understanding that you might say you can't get evicted, but if rent is still being charged, that's not a sustainable situation. As soon as the moratorium is up and people cannot pay, they're out on the street. That's clearly not enough, but I guess because these people are rich and they've been in power for a long time, they don't understand it. And so again, it's on us. It's on colonized people, it's on oppressed people, it's on single mothers, it's on houseless people to begin to organize to change our conditions ourselves without waiting for these people on top to get it together, because clearly they're confused about basic reality. Other things happening in New Mexico is here in occupied Tiwa territory in Albuquerque. Mayor Tim Keller has recently announced a number of punitive measures to enforce the universal mask wearing policy in place in the city. One of those measures is that people will now be removed from city buses if they're not wearing a mask. So, like I just said a few minutes ago, the focus on individual actions rather than the failure of states and governments to take the measures required to keep people safe during this pandemic is a mistake. And this is a very, very perfect example of this. Because who is it that rides buses? Who is it that's going to be taken off the bus by force? It's not going to be the Europeans protesting at fucking Santa Fe talking about, I need a haircut. That's not who's going to be pulled off the bus by the police for not wearing a mask. It's going to be African and indigenous people. It's going to be poor and working class people. It's going to be Chicano people. It's going to be brown people who are targeted by this policy put in place by the mayor. It's going to be African, indigenous, Chicano people being forcibly taken off of these buses for the so-called crime of not wearing a mask. And this is a mistake. This is a mistake. It's going to lead to police violence. It's going to lead to people being charged and facing fines and facing criminal cases during a pandemic when they already don't have resources. And it makes no sense. It makes no sense to make this something that's being criminalized. It makes no sense to make this a police issue. The reality situation is that for 2 straight months, at the beginning of this pandemic in the United States, the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, was straight up telling people not to wear a mask. For 2 months, the entity that's in charge of disseminating accurate information about, pandemics was giving people point blank inaccurate information. So when you see an African person without a mask on the bus, when you see an indigenous person without a mask on the bus, that's not a person who's making a political statement. That's a person that's been failed by the U.S. public health system. That's been failed by New Mexico's public health system. That is not a police issue. That is a situation where you just give them a mask. Just give them a mask. Why are you physically taking them off the bus? How are they supposed to get home? Do you understand the situation when you're taking the bus and it's your last change? And then someone gets on there and fucking pulls you off instead of giving you a mask? How do you get home? It makes no sense. It makes no sense. But APRP New Mexico, Albuquerque Mutual Aid, Pueblo Action Alliance, our Comrade Bird, there are community organizations with no money and no people right now distributing masks throughout the city of Albuquerque. Because the city, instead of just giving people masks and explaining to them they're human beings the situation, is choosing to make not wearing a mask a police issue. So we're going to keep handing out those masks, but we just need to say, Tim Keller, that's a terrible idea. It is a terrible idea to physically remove poor people from buses for not wearing masks. Just give them a fucking mask. And now Dimitri is back, so I'm going to toss it back to you.
Oh yeah, that's real stupid. We're real good at real stupid right now. Really, really good. Remember, I don't even remember what I was going to say. Remember, Dimitri, remember.
Free Clifton White.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Because Clifton White is a political prisoner, and that's what we know. That is what we know. And he's being illegally and unlawfully imprisoned for just for being, and for organizing for liberation and equal treatment of African people. So yes, absolutely, free Clifton White.
We're not going to forget.
Millions of prisoners. See them for more information. But yes, also school is going to be a thing, y'all. Did you cover this? Because I have to.
Go for it.
School is going to be a thing. It's going to be a stupid thing, but it's going to be a thing. You're going to have alternating weeks with your children. It's split by the alphabet, A through L and through Z. So if you're a B like me, I'm going to go like 1 and 3, and the ends are going to be 2 and 4, and it's not right, and it's not productive, and it's not going to work. So if you count online, homeschool or online your kids, that might be the best way for you, if it's possible for you to do so, especially when we all have to participate in capitalism and keep roof over our head and food in our stomachs. So that is the thing. Football, if you have a high school age student who is playing football, they should not be playing football. For a minute there, they were saying that they could go into conditioning and just, practice. That is no longer a thing. So if your child's coach says, hey, you have practice, no the hell they don't. Don't let your kids go out there. Don't let your babies be out there. Don't do it. That's the same for soccer too. If your soccer coach is saying, come on, we're gonna scrimmage. No, you're not. No, you're not. That's gonna shut down. So no, don't do it. And that really does, I think, cover everything from Mexico. We're in shambles. We're in a state of disarray. But we're gonna be all right because we are gonna take care of each other. So don't be houseless. If you need a mask, if you have a need actually, if you need something, you need to say something, AAPRP New Mexico, we got you. So if you need something, say something, and free Clifton White. Let's go to local organizing.
Dope. So yeah, like Demetria mentioned, we, All African People's Revolutionary Party New Mexico chapter, have been engaged in the community defense program, where we've been distributing masks and PPE and groceries and supplies to elders and African families here in occupied Tiwa territory. If you are a person that needs a mask, if you are a person, particularly an elder in the African community who needs support getting food or supplies during this pandemic, we got your back. We can help you out. Like, we have so many masks, so many different kinds of masks, thanks to Pueblo Action Alliance and thanks to our comrade Bird, which means that we can give you a mask. Like, I will bring a mask to your house. All you need to do is email us at apripnewmexico@gmail.com or give us a call at 505-295-0008 or text us if you don't like talking on the phone. Lots of millennials don't like talking on the phone. It's fine. You can contact us any of those ways and we will literally bring you a mask. We will bring you groceries. We are here serving our community because, again, the city of Albuquerque, the state of New Mexico, is half-assing it. And so socialist organizations, communist organizations, African organizations are stepping up in this moment to provide for our people because we know the government's not going to do so. And I also want to say that we're doing this work with like a very small team and no money. Like, we are not grant funded. We are not a nonprofit. We are very often coming out of pocket to do this work. And so we heavily depend on the support of the community. And we also heavily depend on African people joining this fight with us. We have been growing this past month. We have been growing during this pandemic because that's just how good we are at work. Like, we're so good. But we still need more people. Like, we are a very small team, but we do a lot of great work. And so if you're an African watching this program, if you're an African in New Mexico and you've been wondering how to get involved in your community, how to like assist people during this pandemic when they're being abandoned, like please come talk to us. Come join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. This is the moment where the level of organization of our people decides our survival. Like that's always been the case, but during this pandemic when we are dying by the thousands, it is going to be our level of organization that decides our fate in this particular moment. So if you are an African person, if you are not an organization, you are sitting on the sidelines, and we need you in the fight. We need you active. We already have seen like this empire has already shown us it's going to leave us to die. And so APRP New Mexico and African revolutionary organizations all over this country and all over the planet are putting in work to make sure our people are good, and we need your support. We need your help in this moment. Join the APRP. We're hella friendly. We do dope shit. We have this show. We have the community defense program. We have political education events. We have the Pan-African film series. We're doing stuff. We do security for community events. Like we are amazing. We do a lot of stuff, and we would be very grateful for you to join us. So please, if you're interested, again, our email is aprpnewmexico@gmail.com, AAPRP New Mexico@gmail.com, and you can also call or text us at 505-295-0008. If you're African, reach out to us, get involved. We have plenty of stuff for you to do. And also, if you're like revolutionary Pan-African socialist, revolution, that's intense. I don't want to do all that. I understand. Like, especially if that's like the first time you're hearing words like this, like I understand that being intense. And so what we always say in APRP is any organization is better than no organization. Being in any kind of organization fighting for justice is better than just being on the sidelines chilling by yourself. So if the APRP is not fit, if you're like, I would prefer anarchism, I would prefer, some other political line, then feel free to start an organization. All you need to start an organization is like 2 friends and some books. Bam, you're an organization. Once you decide that you have a particular way of viewing the world and a particular way you want to change it, and you get other people involved, you are well on the path to starting your own organization. So if the APRP is not the organization for you, then start one that is for you. Or join any of the many dozens of organizations doing incredible work in this city and contribute to this fight. Because once again, they are going to leave us to die. They are showing us they're going to leave us to die. And so if we want our people to live, if we want our people to survive this pandemic so we can fight for our ultimate freedom, then we must, as African and oppressed and colonized peoples, be organized. We must be in organizations. The APRP is just one. If you're not about this, then join any other one. Join Albuquerque Mutual Aid, join the Red Nation, join Pueblo Action Alliance, join Black Rose. Like, there's so many organizations doing incredible work in this moment. And I guarantee you they're all in the position we are, where they have no money and no people, and they're still doing a ton of stuff. So please, get off the sidelines. Like I just mentioned, Albuquerque Mutual Aid has been feeding thousands, like literally thousands, like over 11,000 people in the city of Albuquerque. They have been delivering groceries and supplies weekly to families all over the city, and they're continuing to do that. If you are a person who requires that kind of assistance, or if you want to support a grassroots community project, it's literally just people, like community members and neighbors coming together to feed each other. If you want to contribute to that work, you can go to ffol.org/mutual aid, and there you'll find a form to either request a care package for Albuquerque Mutual Aid or donate to support Albuquerque Mutual Aid. Other cool things happening with organizations in occupied TOI territory. Our comrades at FAM, which is Free Access to Movements, a childcare collective, which when the APRP was still doing in-person events before the pandemic, literally did childcare almost every event we had for free, because they're awesome. They have moved on to virtual organizing just like us for the duration of the pandemic, and so they host a virtual sing-along and story time for your BBs, for your children, every single Sunday at 3 p.m. Mountain Time. You can find out more information about how to join those sing-alongs at the Free Access to Movements page on Facebook. And lastly, our comrades at the John Brown Breakfast Club are continuing their weekly breakfast burrito giveaway. That breakfast burrito giveaway happens every Saturday morning at 9 or around 10 a.m., like between 9 and 10 a.m., I believe, at the corner of First and Silver in downtown Albuquerque. John Brown Breakfast Club is named for that John Brown, the very famous European who organized an armed struggle against chattel slavery. So they have been comrades for a very long time. They have contributed quite a lot to the work of APIP New Mexico. They often provide free food at our events, and so we deeply appreciate them. And so if you're a person who is food insecure or houseless and you just want a free hot meal from really cool people, then show up at the corner of 1st and Silver Saturday morning, 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Lastly, APIP New Mexico has a couple of upcoming events. First up, we do our monthly Pan-African film series on the second Saturday of every single month. Next month, the film series will be on Saturday, August 8th, and we are going to be screening Winnie, which is a documentary about Winnie Mandela. You might know her as the partner, the wife of the very famous Nelson Mandela, but she was actually an African revolutionary in her own right. She was a revolutionary to her death. She was someone who I personally admire quite a bit. And so we're showing this documentary about her life to commemorate Pan-African Women's Month next month. It's going to be a drive-in. It's going to be a drive-in movie experience, a social distance viewing party with a conversation. And so stay tuned for details about that, but save the date, Saturday, August 8th. Also, our comrade Ajamu in the California chapter of the All African People's Revolutionary Party also has a weekly program where he gives seminars alongside his daughter Shakura about assorted topics relevant to Pan-African revolutionary socialist movements. Last Sunday, he gave a really great overview of socialism and what it is, like revolutionary socialism, what it is, and it's like why it's way better than capitalism. And this coming Sunday, he's going to be talking about how Cuba was able to completely conquer COVID-19. Like I mentioned earlier in the show, Cuba has no new COVID-19 infections this week at the same time as we are breaking all kinds of records for positives in the United States. So he's going to break down why the situation is so different in Cuba and why that is a result of the Cuban Revolution and socialism. So if you want to learn more about Cuba, especially because if you've been living in the United States, I guarantee you have heard a massive amount of misinformation about Cuba. So if you want to hear some truth about Cuba, tune into Ajamu's show. That's going to be Sunday at 5 Mountain Time, 4 Pacific Time. And you can watch that at facebook.com/AjamuUmi, which is Ajamu's Facebook page. And you can also catch past episodes of Ajamu's show on the APIP International YouTube channel. So that concludes our program. We are very, very grateful that y'all were able to join us. We appreciate your comments. We appreciate your interactions. We deeply appreciate Monique for that really incredible discussion of how the U.S. military preys on African, Indigenous, Chicano, and colonized children. Shout out to Monique. Shout out to Veterans for Peace for doing really incredible work against imperialism, against the U.S. war machine. Once again, my name is Onyesanwu. My co-host for the show was Demetria. We are members of the All African People's Revolutionary Party in New Mexico chapter. We are a revolutionary Pan-African socialist organization, and our political objective is Pan-Africanism, which is one unified socialist Africa. We're doing that because when Africa is free, Africans everywhere will be free, and we want freedom, period. Thank you so much for joining us. Tune in next Thursday at 11 a.m. Mountain Time for the next show, and have a great rest of your day. Stay ready for revolution.